So on behalf of Jewish Voice, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today to allow me to ask you a few questions. And the questions will revolve around life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, my favorite sentence from the Declaration of Independence. And I think all politicians should honor life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness whenever they can. So I'm going to ask you 2 or 3 questions from life, and then liberty, and then the pursuit of happiness, and try to finish in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Number one, let's focus on life for now. How do you protect Florida from southern border invasion that the administration's allowing and sending folks all around the country? How can you protect Florida from that invasion?
Well, fortunately, when I became governor, I was able to sign a ban on sanctuary cities into law. And so we also have E-Verify for the first time starting at the beginning of this year. So we have, I think, structures in place that would make it difficult for people to come here illegally. So we feel that we did the right thing there. We also are working with our local law enforcement, because what happens is when Trump was president, if I had a criminal alien that served a sentence in Florida institution, ICE would pick them up and then send them away. Now Biden's ICE releases them into our society. So we're tracking all that. We're alerting local law enforcement and working together. But make no mistake, when he's releasing people like that, even people that have been convicted of crimes, that's not going to be good for public safety.
So that was my second question. Can you, in effect, create a Florida ICE, so to speak, to make up for the federal ICE that is not exactly working right now?
We actually are looking into it. I mean, the idea would be if somebody is here illegally, say they get convicted of molesting a child, they serve time in prison, then their sentence is up. Can we just put them on a plane without the federal government being involved and send them back to wherever they were from? Obviously, Biden, they would be very upset if we did. We're just seeing how you would do that and what abilities we have. But at the end of the day, we are suing Biden for not following the law and not enforcing the law. I actually think we're going to win that case. But short of that, what is our remedy? We just have to just sit there. So we're actively looking at our options in that regard.
Okay, and my third question, then we'll move to liberty. Third question is, if the Biden administration signs a new JCPOA and basically pays Iran again another $150 billion, and in a few years they produce nukes and ICBMs, they can blow up everybody in Florida. Is there some way a state could sue a federal government that's not protecting the interests of the citizens of Florida?
So here's the thing about that. I mean, I was opposed to the Iran deal when I was in Congress. Obviously, I supported President Trump getting out of it. My view is they have to follow the Constitution. You want an Iran deal, that's a treaty. It needs to be ratified by the Senate. If it's not ratified by the Senate, I don't think they have the authority to go down that road. And so I don't even know that it's an issue of state versus federal. I think it's an issue of they are not following the Constitution. There is no way an Iran deal would get 2/3 ratification in the U.S. Senate.
Right.
But that's why the founding fathers made it a high bar, right, because they thought that you could have a rogue administration come in and do things that were injurious for the country, and they wanted to make sure you had a supermajority of the U.S. Senate that could serve as a check on that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's go to liberty. How do you implement universal school choice? With the public school systems out of control throughout the country, basically the only way parents can protect their kids is by sending them to school of their choice. So what more can you do for universal school choice in Florida?
Well, I was happy to sign the biggest expansion in history this year of school choice. And so we're going to end up with probably close to 250,000 kids within the next couple of years on just scholarships for generally low income. But what we also did, we actually raised the income threshold, because you got a lot of middle income families. I mean, you talk about here in South Florida, middle income family, it isn't like you're living high on the hog. I mean, it's expensive to live and all these other things. So we think that that was important, and we're probably further along than anybody has been in terms of meaningful parental choice. Incidentally, when I ran for governor in 2018, the guy I ran against, he was going to eliminate all these programs. And I think any Democrat, because they're in with the teachers unions, they take the position that they would get rid of all these things. That would throw in Florida 100, 200, 250,000 kids out of school.
Mm-hmm. Number two, on school books. I hear a lot of stories about school books that are infected with what I call red and green communism and Islamism, and very short on Constitution and civics. And I hear that majority of books in America are from foreign publishers. How could you is there some way to mandate U.S. books for U.S. kids and not allow any foreign-owned publishers to sell books in Florida?
There might be. I mean, I wasn't even aware of the extent foreigners were doing the books. I do know it's a constant struggle because anything you do, they will try to smuggle in ideology. I mean, for example, we just banned critical race theory in Florida, but we didn't just say no critical race theory, because if you say no critical race theory, they will just rename it and still do it. So we actually delineated, what departs from our standards and what would be considered to be, unacceptable. But I do think it's important that people understand, because you'll hear people criticize us for what we're doing. It's a marketplace of ideas. A public school system is not a marketplace of ideas. We choose what we are going to do for the upbringing of our students. For example, we teach kids English in Florida. We don't teach Italian or Swahili or anything else because it's important for that. When we offer foreign languages, we typically offer Spanish or things that are very relevant to where we are. So it's totally appropriate to make sure that those textbooks reflect the values of the state and that we keep out some of the ideology that's very pernicious, like critical race theory.
My last question for Liberty is, politicians are not supposed to take funds from foreign sources, but universities take foreign financing. Is there some way to forbid foreign financing? For example, Confucius Institutes would be an example of foreign financing, but is it reasonable for a governor to outlaw foreign financing of universities, just as political campaigns are not allowed to take foreign financing?
Well, I obviously think it's reasonable because I just effectively did it on Monday. Last Monday, we signed a bill combating foreign influence both in our universities and in government institutions, as well as corporate espionage, largely dealing with CCP influence. So we have effectively banned Confucius Institutes in the state of Florida, and I think that's very important. We also are requiring transparency. If you're contracting with the state, you need to be able to produce, if you're having foreign income or have any foreign relations, particularly with things like the Communist Party of China. So we need to work on foreign influence in our universities. We're the first state to really take it on. But I mean, as you know, we have important universities all over this country, and it seems like every other week you have someone indicted because they have some type of relationship with the Communist Party of China or some other foreign entity.
They're all for sale, all for sale. Okay, let's go to happiness. 3 quick questions. How can you protect Florida from federal climate change, in quotes, climate change mandates that might affect Florida? And in your opinion, let's just pretend you don't think will have any impact on the climate, but stick you with some mandates.
Well, I think it goes similar to the Iran deal. This Paris was never ratified by the Senate. If you want to do a treaty, you got to get it ratified. We know it wouldn't be ratified by the Senate. But here, I think now that we've had 4 years of Trump pulled out of Paris. Oh, the media had a spasm, everything. But guess what? We didn't do the onerous mandates, but the emissions are actually less than what Paris called for because of technology and innovation. So I think it's important that we don't allow government to stifle that type of innovation. And I think you're going to continue to have cleaner and cleaner sources of energy, but we are never, at least in our lifetime, I think, going to have just no fossil fuels. You see in places like Texas, when they had with the wind and some of these issues that they've had. So I think that's always going to be a part of it.
Okay, number 2, can you criminalize BDS? And also on campus, there's Israel Apartheid Week, which is just pure blood libel slander. Can you criminalize BDS and, let's say, Apartheid Week and other forms of anti-Semitism on the campuses?
Well, I think it depends on what it is. So with BDS, we've actually have a law that works. For example, Airbnb was targeting the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria right as I was becoming governor. And I made it be known, we're not tolerating it. As soon as I got in, we added them to our list of kind of companies that were going to be effectively sanctioned. And guess what? They changed and they were able to do it. So I think in our perspective, I don't know that we would have had other jurisdiction over them, but certainly with that, was very effective. In terms of universities, I think we've done a lot. As they mentioned out there, we signed the anti-Semitism bill that said, look, we're going to define anti-Semitism, and however you would treat racism, you treat anti-Semitism on these university campuses. And I think we've actually had some success. I know it's always a constant struggle just with all the influences on the universities, but I think that was the right approach.
Okay, my last question on happiness and the last question of the interview. cannabis is getting a lot of acclaim, so to speak, around the states, but no one ever, I come from the healthcare industry, no one ever did any clinical trials on cannabis. No one has any clue what happens 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. And in the absence of clinical trials, kids are experimenting more and more. What's your opinion of cannabis, and is there a way to slow it down, so to speak, basically to save the children from hurting themselves inadvertently?
Well, I think the one point is what we're finding with these kids, when they get involved in this is way, way more potent than what was happening in like the 60s or something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I'll take your word for it.
Well, so you have these kids, and I mean, it really is, especially as their brains are still mature. I mean, it is a big, big issue. Right. So we're very much opposed, particularly for children. Now, Florida has a constitutional amendment for medical cannabis, and so one of my jobs has been to implement that. How the data has come out on that in terms of from the medical side, I think this is still kind of essentially in the experimental phase, so we'll have to see. But kids, is a really big problem. We need to work to make sure that it's kept away from them.
As a final point, I personally pretend I'm a professor, and I grade politicians on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You get an A and an A and an A.
Oh,
Congratulations. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate you. Yeah, of course.